Welcome back to the Latitude Podcast. I am the Senior Platform Manager here at 483 North. Hello, hello, hello. If you're new, thank you for coming in and sitting down with us. If you have been here before, thank you so much. Please tell your friends and tell their friends. And remember, make sure they are all Bills fans. And if they're not, evangelize them. Today, I have Rob Snyder here. He is the CEO of both Waffle, a SOC 2 related startup, and also Reframe, a company that helps you get to 1 million of annual recurring revenue. Rob is a ex-McKinsey consultant, and as well as a member of the Harvard Innovations Labs and currently a fellow over there. As much as I can do to do a good introduction, I think I'll leave it to you, Rob, to tell the people who you are a little bit more.
Yeah, so that was a good introduction. I'll give you that. The thing I would add is I've been a founder a couple times, and I've just gotten obsessed with the early stage. How do you find product market fit? What is product market fit? How do you figure out what customers really, really, really want?
Yeah.
Basically, all I think about, all I focus on, all I care about, it is the most fascinating thing on earth. And I feel like for some reason, there are very few people who are that obsessed with this, and it's fascinating. Do
you feel like that's an interesting point, because I feel like it's really easy, and there's a lot of like articles written right now where I feel like there's a lot of like survivorship bias when it comes to PMF. Like you kind of can step into it, get lucky, and realize, wow, I had a lick with this customer, and this customer now referred me to this customer, and now we have data to now work from in order to understand what to do next. But if you are a person who maybe didn't get lucky within those first 100 customer calls, what do you do? How do you correct course?
Yeah. Well, I think the point you started with is just really hard to know why a company is successful, period. Yeah. Like this. So like, why did Apple succeed? I don't know. There's like 50 billion stories we could tell about why Apple succeeded and X other company didn't, like whatever it is. So yeah, it's all the turtlenecks, like 100% turtleneck. And so, yeah, I mean, first we have to know what we're looking for, right? We're looking for somebody to pull the product out of us versus us feeling like we're constantly pushing.
Yes.
And so where do you find that? Well, you have more customer conversations and try to figure out what are they trying to pull. And those conversations, like, you can really tell if they pull, if they buy something from you, whether or not it exists. That's what you want to focus on, is like a sales conversation. Do they pull?
Got you. It's a good point to kind of like anchor off of, because I remember it's in our session that we had, off camera. If you'd like to be a part of 483 North, please hit our applications page. Humble plug. But you mentioned sort of the nuance between pain points versus projects. And, we're taught, I was taught, and I think that a lot of VCs also teach, companies, look for your pain points, put them in a beautiful, delicate slide, and then talk about how you are directly solving those pain points in a solutions slide afterwards. And that's going to be the first couple of slides of your deck. What's that nuance between anchoring on a project versus anchoring on a pain point?
Yeah, this is the thing that took me a ton of personal pain to figure out, this is the pain cave, which is people have a lot of pain points. I'll often say life is a series of pain points, and most of them we don't do anything about. We don't do anything about any. Like, I have so many things in my life right now that, like, yeah, they're pain points, but am I going to solve them? No. And so if you think of like the Venn diagram of pain points and things I do, there's a little bit of an overlap in that Venn diagram, but it's not a significant overlap. And so the question is, what am I actually taking action on? What am I actually trying to do? Not what are the pain points that I can complain about. So when we think about what action are you trying to take, we need some sort of a way to think about that. And I've found just most straightforward way is thinking about it like a project on your to-do list.
Got you. And when you're kind of thinking about it, like versus like a project base, I feel like that's like getting at the nuance, pulling out, playing detective, and kind of understanding what the project is. Like, strategically, tactically, how does getting close to someone's project versus their pain point work on a call? Like, if I was strategically trying to pull that out of a customer or something, like, is it something that I'm asking? Is there a question set there, or is it more so just about, trying to get them to talk as much as possible so you can pick it out of a haystack?
Yeah, actually, early sales calls, you often just get them to talk forever. And what I found is I actually didn't know I was supposed to be looking for things that were shaped like projects.
Yeah.
And so what will happen is you'll get someone who's talking and they're like, oh my gosh, I've been I've been using Salesforce, I've been using Airtable, I've been using XYZ for 3 years, cobbling these systems together, and it is frustrating.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I hear that. I hear pain points. Let me dig deeper into those pain points. But they're not trying to change. I haven't heard anything about what they're trying to accomplish. And so instead of just digging deeper into pain points, what I really want to know is, all right, what are you trying to do right now? What progress are you trying to make? What are you trying to achieve? What projects, what goals, what initiatives do you have that are like based on these things sucking? And it often isn't like one-to-one, hey, I have these pain points, therefore I need to replace these systems. It's often, I have these pain points, but what I really need to focus on is this other thing.
Got you. So it's really about like, and if I'm getting it correctly, it's more so about having like a really intentional conversation about what's on your plate.
Yes.
What are you working on? What's on your plate? Like, what is on your immediate to-do list that you need to get solved? And then trying to figure out from there, like, what is the product application that I can give you? Like, if you need to, for instance, make a to-do list, am I selling you Notion then? Being like, well, hey, you can make a to-do list on our software right now. And this is how you do it. And here's all this to-do list functionality and, X, Y, and Z. Is that kind of getting at the kind of crux of that?
Yeah, it's getting them out of this kind of complaining world and focusing them on what are they trying to do. And so what that looks like in a sales conversation, you have the discovery part of a sales conversation. Instead of saying, hey, tell me about your current state. What are your problems? It's like, hey, tell me about your current state. Sure. What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to accomplish? What's holding you back from accomplishing that? And the conversation's superficially the same in that they are talking in both of these. And I'm listening and it's really interesting. You have all these problems and pain points. The other one, though, is like, hey, here's what I'm literally trying to accomplish in my job right now. Can you help me with that? And if you can help me with the thing I'm trying to accomplish right now, I'm going to pull that product out of you. I'm going to pull versus you having to push and convince and persuade. That's a signal that you're doing it wrong if you're trying to convince somebody.
Got it. I understand. So that's interesting because I think about like sales and I sort of interrelated with the task of relationship building.
Yeah.
And it feels as though in one approach, there is maybe more of a focus on being maybe more human, trying to understand what your problems are and then actively help you solve those problems versus like me maybe trying to kind of maybe push, as you say, push on you and say, okay, like this is your problem set and you should buy this for this reason. And let me create another project, more work for you. How do you think about relationship building as it relates to like, making those sales and getting them out there? I feel as though the approach that you take almost, packages in that relationship building aspect in it because you are being so personable in that. Do you think about that when you considered this?
Yeah, I think when I first started selling, I thought the job was to like basically poke at their pain points and trying to convince them that they should change and that they should want my solution.
Like the challenger model, right?
Yeah, it's like that.
Yeah.
I actually, fun fact, I tried to use that challenger model and I obviously didn't use it right, but the person on the other end was so offended when I used it by like minute 3 of the sales call. This was the most important sales call of my life, by the way. I will not get into reasons why, but this was a massively important sales call. They were so offended that they took our roadmap and gave it to our biggest competitor and asked them to build it.
Whoa.
Because, yeah.
Oh man.
Biggest possible customer we could have had. And it's because I thought that my job was to challenge them, to convince them, to twist their arm, to put them in a corner and like dominate them.
Yeah.
When really, it's like, that's not how sales actually works, especially if you're trying to find product market fit. If you're trying to find product market fit, you're not looking for a world in which you have to convince every single person that they should want your product.
Yeah.
You want them to pull that thing out of you with the least amount of work from you.
Yeah.
And so it's way less about convincing. It's about, hey, it's like we're sitting on the same side of the table. Here's what someone just like you was trying to accomplish. It sounds like this is similar, but you tell me.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. So in another life, I used to work as an investor and sort of doing private equity. And I think that it's a little bit understated, and this might be a hot take. I think it's a lukewarm take, but effectively, I think if you're a first year analyst, if you're an associate, and maybe you're out of MBA, at an investment fund, 9 times out of 10, you're actually kind of like an SDR, and you have other stuff, and you're really trying to sell the fund. And your job really is to, sell money to people who don't need it. That was put to me earlier on in my career. It was like, really and truly, the best startups don't necessarily need your money, and they probably don't even really need your support. But you need to figure out the right way to anchor us in order to make sure that we are a logical choice for them to come to as a funding option. But but that sort of being said, you meet a lot of people and you put them into a pipeline and you tier them, because sometimes you have those conversations and it's not the right time, right? And so something I noticed was more successful associates, they were keeping people warm, so to say, and they were finding the right time to anchor when the needs of the company matched what the PE fund was selling, really, and that was money. And so I guess, how do you think about, keeping people warm and that process? Because it almost feels like you find people who have an immediate need, but a lot of times you don't find a quorum of those immediate needs. But here you've had all these calls and spent all this time. It has to be for something, right?
Yeah. So that's a really good way to think about it too. I think your story is a very good mental model for this, of like, people don't just get a call from a PE shop and they're like, oh, you know what? Maybe I will raise 20 million right now. Like, it's like, no, it's an actual thoughtful, there's a process to figuring that out in a company. And then it's relevant to them at a point in time. And then the kind of like deal starts.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We basically, so thinking about your job in that situation, it's like, 1, find the people who are actually going through that process. And then 2 is, if they're not going through that process right now, nothing you're going to say is going to convince them, you know what? I was focused on this other thing, but why don't I let me just drop that and, go raise 20 million right now from a bunch of PE funds. Like, no, that's not going to happen. And so the role is just nothing you send them is going to change their mind. It's going to happen in their world.
Yes.
And so your job is just to, as you said, keep them warm, keep the relationship so that when it is relevant, they come to you first. And it's not about kind of like sending things, hey, you're raising this month, you really should consider raising right now. Like, it's not that. It's because that's annoying.
Yeah.
Once you just like release this sense of, I need to convince people they should want this, life gets a lot simpler and you stop annoying people.
It's good feedback, and it's very real. It's like, I think about really what financial services is, and I think about the services aspect of that. I think we were talking a little about that before. It's more so about like we should be providing relevant and timely support. And at the end of the day, it's like we sit in a position where, like, as investors or accelerators, whatever, where we have a lot of proprietary information that we have developed via, like, in the habits that we've sort of developed via counseling, advising, whatever. As a person who sort of sat on the consultant side and also sat on the startup founder side, very different sides.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people who are startup founders also have a lot of different opinions about consultants.
Oh, yeah.
I guess based on, these juxtapositions of experiences, what have you found from consulting world that's carried over? And if it's nothing, that's okay. And what have you found that's been applicable, to you based on your background? Or was it all just, I need to figure everything out from scratch now because this is completely different?
Yeah, I think it's very easy, and there are a million ways to like dunk on consultants.
Totally.
And
it's a little overplayed.
It's definitely overplayed. There's a lot of things I learned in consulting that were counterproductive to becoming a founder. Like, that's totally true. That said, like, my 2 years at McKinsey were basically, it was a way to beat capitalism and being a good employee into me and like a good work ethic into me, as it was my first job. What a great first job to just do really hard, difficult things. Whether or not they're important is like a separate thing. Whether or not you're adding value is like a separate question. But I think it's a great starting point for that reason. Now, that said, what I've noticed is that there's, especially in the founder space, there's a lot of consultants who haven't been founders before. And it's just really hard to know what it's like in the founder's chair if you haven't been there before. And I don't know that that's necessarily the case across all types of consulting, but the founder role, especially in the early stage, is so difficult and so ambiguous that I think you need a firsthand perspective, because on the outside, when you're looking at a founder, you're like, if you're just like a commentator or consultant who hasn't done it before, it's like, what? It's so obvious what they should be doing. Why are they doing the obvious things?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, if you know what's going on in my brain right now, like you realize that just throwing out hot takes and opinions and slogans is actually counterproductive to founders. And
adding noise.
It's so simple. Yeah, it's adding noise. Like I have this concept of the Gordian knot, right? Like we have this Gordian knot in our brains that is literally can't be untied. It's just so complex of how is this business going to work? And basically what a bunch of people giving advice to founders is it's making the knot bigger, not smaller.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. And I say that as obviously being a person in the investment community and obviously really doing his best to make sure that I'm not adding more stuff to my founders' plates. My founders, as if they're mine, they're not. Just want to be as helpful as I can. But taking a different step back, as an investor, right? I think that there is a lot of thought leadership out there about what the right way you should, what kind of signals you should be looking for in a sales organization, and also what kind of signals you should be looking for with founders. And something that I've heard a lot is founder-led sales are incredibly important, and it's something that maybe you should put a lot of weight to. I personally jive with it because to me, it makes sense, right? And you're having those calls with the customers, you're understanding what the pain points are, what the projects are, and you are actively trying to build a product roadmap that gets at it. But also, I meet other founders though who their skill set maybe isn't really selling. Their skill set is maybe like building the software, maybe it's product management. And they hire that head of sales to run that motion. And I hear differing opinions about that approach. I guess what's your opinion? And is it all right to just maybe hire someone to manage those sales, or should you as a CEO be driving those conversations to inform your understanding about, I guess, the zeitgeist of the niche that you're trying to sell to?
Yeah, it's a good one. I lean on founders should sell. For a while, not forever necessarily, but that's a big part of the job forever. And so it's worth doing. The reason that founders should sell is not because we're good at it. We tend to be pretty bad at it. We tend to be damn straight awful, like just absolutely awful at it. And even if you're like a technical founder, it's like a scary thing. It's a thing you don't want to do. Yeah. You do it because it's the best way to get a firsthand intuition.
Snyder's Law.
Yeah. You do it to get a firsthand intuition of what your customers actually are trying to do. I need to understand it from their point of view. And the highest fidelity places to do that are in sales calls and in kind of like onboarding and customer support and like all of that. It's working alongside customers as they're trying to accomplish stuff using your product or considering your product. And so it's a way to get really high quality information. And that's why you do it. Not because you're good at it. What I'll say, so we'll get to Snyder's Law in a second, because I think that's an important one. Like what I'll say is, actually, why don't we start with Snyder's Law? Okay. Snyder's Law is that basically founders who don't have a sales background will typically use any excuse not to sell. Anything that can be used as an excuse not to sell will be used. Oh, we need more features. Oh, I need to go raise money. Oh, I got to do XYZ. Like all of these are good excuses. They're great reasons, but if they're used as reasons to avoid and delay selling, they're bad. And so I call it Snyder's Law because I am guilty, not because I am above it. I named it after myself so that I like just have to look myself in the mirror and say, it's just it's super tempting to do that. So founders have to sell. You're not going to be good at it. Just the thing is, if you're obsessed with figuring out what are your customers actually trying to achieve and how can you best serve them, that is the best thing for your business. You'll build the right product. You'll figure out everything and who wants to be served when. Like that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. And so it's interesting you say this because obviously we meet a lot of people who are like, hey, I have X, Y, and Z. Like my product is in market. I have a couple of customers and I'm going to go raise a round, right? And then they go out to a bunch of VCs and then all the VCs, for some reason, they're like, interesting, but it's not really a thesis fit. Interesting. Oh, let's put us on your newsletter. We'll wait and then we'll see, how everything evolves. And to me, that almost reminds me of when you're going out for a sale. And then the person who you're selling to, your potential customer, is basically giving you a soft no. And they're trying to preserve optionality long enough that maybe that soft no would become a hard maybe. When you're thinking about, I guess, running a process, like, and when you're raising VCs, I guess, is it about like what, I guess it seems like it's really more about maybe take a step back, build a strong company, and then fundraise based on that, right? Is that how you get pull from VCs, by creating that product they really want to invest in? As a person who's, I guess, who's been on the sides, what do you think about it?
Yeah. So first, I don't care about VCs. No offense.
No,
do not care.
Yeah.
I care about building awesome companies. If you do that, VCs will tend to come knocking at your door.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like when you get a lot of those soft no's from VCs, it's either a sign that you're just like reaching out to the wrong kind, the person who doesn't get it, or it's a sign you're like not you're not articulating your company in a way that is exciting to the right person. And like, no matter what it is, the answer is you have to go build a company regardless. If you build an awesome company, VCs will come knocking at your door. The right ones will hear about you. They'll find out about you. They'll come knocking. Like, that's where the focus should be. Raising VCs, it's often because it's the thing that's like announced online.
Yeah.
It's thought of as the purpose. It is absolutely not. It is a funding source. It is a particularly bad funding source. Just like it's expensive,
time consuming, it's fickle,
expensive.
And you don't,
It's
and a lot of times the needs are opaque, or they change as the seasons do.
Yeah, it's there's service providers.
Yeah.
Who are just kind of annoying, and so, many, not all.
Yes.
I present company included.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yes.
I appreciate it. I think I think you're kind of nailing something though. It's like when you find a VC that you really jive with, they can quickly become a champion. Yeah. It feels almost like it can be an all or nothing thing. And so you find those VCs who are on your cap table, who are getting you this customer culture, getting those introductions, who are opening up their networks, who are absolutely knocking down doors for you. It's just the fact that, unfortunately, that's not everyone. And it's easy to want it to be. But taking a kind of a step back, kind of pivoting into, I guess, this idea, because speaking of VCs, right, and speaking of just prominent voices, I think it was, and I might be butchering the name, but maybe Brian Balfour, who kind of around 2017 made an article about the different kinds of fits, model market, product market, all those other kinds of fits and profiles. I view that as sort of one lens to view this, but also it seems like it's on the other end of the spectrum of maybe your like lines of thought as it relates to like getting to PMF. Given that it seems like your approach is much more so first orders and nuanced versus here's this matrix of complexity. What do you think about the different types of fits? And I guess, how does your methodology talk to, or maybe even completely exist apart from, those other ways of thinking about PMF?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So like zooming out, the way I think about product market fit is it's about repeating a single customer case study where the customer has intense demand. Basically, startups we're trying to figure out what is our one case study that causes customers to say hell yes before and after they buy. And then once we figure that out, how do we just repeat that as many times as possible? Yeah. And so that's my model. And I view that as like the generative model. It is the thing that tells you where to focus and what matters. There are a lot of other models out there, a lot of other descriptions out there. There are a lot of very good ones. They are analytical models, which help you look at a thing and understand it. They don't generate.
Gotcha. And
so I care more about the mechanics in the founder's chair of how do I figure it out and what matters here? And like, how do the pieces of my business work together? The case study model is, I think, the simplest possible description of a business. And it's very useful in the founder's chair when so many things can matter. I need a very, very narrow and focused thing to think about. The other ones are useful later on when it's like, okay, XYZ thing isn't working. How do I think about this other piece of it? How do I analyze how do I think about defensibility? How do I think about all of these other things that matter post fit? Got you.
That makes sense. It's like, so essentially like one is, so thinking about the mechanics of PMF at the beginning to get you going, and then viewing it as in different dimensions later down the road when those are real dimensions you should be thinking about. Maybe that's the way to stack it. You're more or less, it's like a foundational model. So I've been told that we are reaching the 5-minute mark. I would love to make this be like a 3 to 4 hour long program. I don't want to put you through that. So we will adhere to the 5-minute warning that we have coming up. But I want to end sort of by digging a little bit more into the case study format, because I kind of believe this can be great. This is great for founders who are listening to this pod to kind of learn and understand, because I feel like the hesitation with using maybe like one singular case study versus a bunch of case studies, right, is I think people maybe wrongly think of that as a single point of failure. Like, what if this case study doesn't work? But with the way that you speak about using case studies, it's more nuanced. It's also more integrated into your sales pipeline. Can you talk about how you use case studies as a sales tool?
Yeah, totally. So I think the case study, the way we typically think about case studies is these are the things that we put on our website to brag about how cool we are.
Yeah.
Right. And that's fine. That's a great use. But I think they're actually the thing, like the blueprint for our business, or to use your word from earlier, the foundation for the business. It tells us, like, who do we serve? Whoever we show this case study to, who looks at it and says, oh yeah, I want that. Like, that's who we serve. And what do we do? What do we deliver for them? Well, whatever we delivered for this case study customer that caused them to say, yeah, that was awesome after they bought, right? Like, that's it. That's it. It's that simple. And so case study is this foundational model. The crazy thing that I found out about this is that, like, there's so many different tools, techniques for sales, marketing. Oh, there's all this. It's like a rabbinical set of definitions that you need to understand. Oh, well, how exactly is positioning different than segmentation is different than, like, it's like, okay, forget most of that stuff. Use a case study that says, hey, when we worked with Jim was trying to do this. Are you trying to do that? And it basically, you just use the case study, show the case study as your sales process. And if they're a good fit, they're going to look at the case study and say, yeah, that's what I want. And if they don't, well, interesting, we have a conversation about why they are different from this case study, which helps us determine, okay, do we have the right case study? Should we tweak it? Or should we just not be showing it to this kind of person?
Yeah.
And that's the process through which you figure out who says hell yes and what's the right case study.
You know, it's interesting, and this might be a very mundane example, but my dad did construction for years, and so I grew up with lots of samples, swatches of different color palettes, and it sounds to me it's more so like being like, this is taupe, and then everybody who wants a taupe kitchen, you take your color palette of taupe, and then you say, hey, this is the kind of taupe that I can like put on your bathroom wall. Do you want this? And then they say yes, or they say yes, but if I could use it if it was a little bit darker. And then you tweak and iterate. How do you iterate on that case study, or does it stay static as you keep going? Yeah,
I would think of it actually in that case of showing like an example kitchen that you had done, or an example bathroom that you had done, and saying, here's a bathroom we did. What do you want different about yours? And that's the level, because it's hard for me to look at it as somebody who has recently tried to pick paint colors, right? Like, it's really hard for me to look at just a paint color and say, is that going to look good on the wall? Like, I have to see the whole room.
Yes.
And so, yeah. And so when you have these case study conversations with potential customers, you're going to see at certain points, they like zone out, or they're like, oh, that seems interesting for someone, which is the equivalent of saying, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, fascinating. Why?
Yes.
And getting into why they're like, they don't think it's relevant for them, helps you figure out what the right case study is. And then instead of like going and rebuilding your entire product, or, you know, spending 3 months developing something new, you just change a couple words on a case study and then show it to the next person and see if they react differently. And what you're trying to get to is the one where it's repeatedly a hell yes when they see it.
Gotcha. It's the journey towards having the magnum opus case study.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we are coming up on time, and this is usually the point where I like to make a cute little kitschy rhyme. That rhyme. So there you go. But without further ado, Rob, I'll leave it to you. Let the people know what you're up to and where they can find you.
Yeah. So I'm building a couple companies. One's called Product Market Fit Camp. which is where founders come together to find product market fit. The second is Waffle, which is for B2B startups. If you want to deploy your product onto AWS and have it automatically be SOC 2 compliance, use Waffle. Come reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. I post way too much there. I write on Substack. Rob Snyder is my name, and I'm sure my LinkedIn will be somewhere in this. And
Yes, it will.
website is robsnyder.org. And I don't remember what my Substack URL is. So find it somewhere.
As a Substack subscriber of Rob's, I can say they're all certified bangers. And also, if you're looking up Rob Snyder, it's Snyder. But
Damn straight.
not Schneider. Anyways, go Bills. We'll see you guys
Go
in the
Bills.
next one.